This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And welcome to Glove Fists. My name is Frank Latirzo, full-time observer, part-time writer, joined by co-host, former six-term president of the BWAA Association, Boxers Writers Association of America. Jack, I'll give you $1 if you can name the song that Mac was using as a bumper just now.
Oh, I wasn't listening to Mac. I heard the song.
You didn't listen to the bumper?
I did listen to it, I gotta admit, but I don't know the name. It was kind of like
No Time by the Guess Who, right, Mac?
Yeah, it was kind of like the Honeymooners. Remember that episode when Norton played the piano, Swanee River, and Ralph went on the $99,000 question? He was an expert, he knew every song, but he didn't know what Norton was warming up with, Swanee River. So if they asked me who the author was of that song, I'd probably say Frank Latirzo, in Panic, when they finally forced me into an answer.
The Honeymooners, Jack, one of my all-time favorite songs, shows.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So anyhow, Jack, we had a good weekend. There were a couple fights. There's a somewhat quasi-big fight next weekend. Time's yours. Where you want to go?
Yeah, well, let's review this past weekend, and let's start off with Teofimo Lopez, even though we really should be starting off with Jesse Bam Rodriguez because he was the big star of the weekend. Mixed feelings towards Teofimo Lopez's performance over Steve Claggett. When it was all over, I gave Lopez a grade of a B. I thought he fought really well. The only thing missing, he didn't get the stoppage. He never put Claggett down. He never hurt him badly. He shook him up a couple of times, stunned him, landed some heavy blows, but never came close to stopping him. But right before we went on the show, Frank, I realized something that I knew before. Claggett's a durable guy.
Yep.
He's only entering the contest with Teofimo. He had 47 fights and was only stopped once. And that was in 2011, way back. So that nearly doesn't count. And think of all the great fighters who've had long careers, the old timers of the past, who'd have close to 100 fights, 150 fights. They'd be stopped like 3 times or so in their career, even the all-time greats. So Claggett was only stopped once. He was a durable guy. But I think the reason people are disappointed on Teofimo Lopez, because this was a hand-picked opponent. The idea was to get him a fight that would make him look good. And he was offered a few different opponents, and he settled on Steve Claggett. And when Teofimo is praising a guy profusely beforehand, you figure this guy's not going to be a threat at all, because the really good fighters like Lomachenko, Josh Taylor, he trashes them beforehand, to build himself up. But against Claggett, he was saying, this guy's tough. If I don't come ready, I could lose this fight. He was talking his opponent up. But Claggett wasn't there to pick up a payday. He wasn't there to be the supporting actor. He really did come to win. He didn't just try to win. He didn't just think he'd win, but he had this tremendous self-belief he was going to get it done. And you could tell when the fight was over, Claggett wasn't happy he went the distance. He was devastated that he actually lost the fight, because to his way of thinking, he was a pro for 15 years. This is what he worked his whole life for, and he came up short. So even though I gave Teo a B at the time, I'm going to raise him to a B plus. I don't know. What grade would you give him, Frank?
I think a big is fair. I look, the fight is pretty much what we thought. The better guy won, the more skilled guy, the more talented guy won. Claggett came to fight, has a good chin, and you can't say he fought to survive that he didn't. It just Teofimo couldn't get the knockout. My only issue with Teofimo is when he lets his hands go and he puts his punches together, you can see how skilled and gifted he is. He just doesn't do it enough. And if you crowd him a little bit, you can shut his offense down a little bit more. That's basically my takeaway. I'm not going to kill him for the showing. Yeah, we expect a little bit more. Let's give Claggett some credit. Where I have issue is, and I know how the game works, and that is, does Teofimo really think he can go to 147 and hang with Bud Crawford? I mean, Jack Crawford will never take that fight because there's not a lot of money. There's nothing for him to gain by giving Teofimo a beating. But it's just funny that they even mention them in the same breath.
Yeah, Teofimo's career has been, I don't know what to make out of it. I was about to say it's been a little disappointing, but one more big win, and he should be on the ballot for the International Boxing Hall of Fame. This is a guy who scored 2 monster victories in his career over Vasily Lomachenko, when a lot of people were rating Lomachenko as number 1 in the world pound for pound.
Yep.
He legitimately beat Lomachenko. And then a monster win over Josh Taylor, in which, Teofimo is regarded as a little bit of an underdog in that fight, and no more than even
Beat him conclusively, too.
And there's been other good wins over guys like Richard Comney, etc. But he should be in high demand. He should be the one being hunted, but he's still being the hunter. Somehow I don't like the way his career has been handled. Maybe the full blame goes to Teofimo himself. I don't know what to make out of it. He's been erratic. He had to slip up against George Kambosos. He claims he was sick, this and that, but I don't want to hear excuses.
He was dropped in the fight.
Sandor Martin, Jermaine Ortiz, he got the W's, but he struggled, and those decisions were somewhat controversial. And I don't know what to make out of Teo. Does he rise to the occasion? But what's there from now, Frank? He's 140 pounds. All of a sudden, the 140-pound division doesn't look as appealing. It just doesn't. The big fights on that. I'll tell you, Tank Davis, he's fighting at 135. Shakur Stevenson will move up to 140 to take on Teo. But the fight's not going to be made because Teo is promoted by Top Rank. And Shakur, who we'll get to later, he's having his last fight for Top Rank under the contract. So unless he re-ups with them for number of fights, they're not going to risk getting Lopez knocked off by Shakur Stevenson, if he's not Top Rank's fighter. I guess the most logical thing, Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, would be the winner of Jack Cadwell and Regis Prograis in August. But that's not even a mega fight. That's just a very good fight. And maybe fighting Cadwell in England, will be a big event. But
I would be good with both of those fights, Jack. They're both elite guys, or the three of them are at the top. It would be an interesting fight. And it's like, you could make a case. Well, going into the Cadwell fight against Prograis, you could make a case that Teo could lose to either of those guys, or he could beat them. It all depends on which one shows up and what we see from them when they fight. But I'll take those fights, Jack. We can't have monster fights every week, every month, but let these guys fight and get known a little bit more. Teo's starting to build a resume. Prograis's been in there with a lot of good guys, and so is Catterall. So I'll take that fight based on what's going on. We don't have that much going on right now anyhow. We look at the schedule. We're going to talk about Shakur in a little bit. But what do we have after that, basically? Crawford?
No. We have. I just want to mention a fight that took place, the chief support on that show in Miami that Teofimo defeated Steve Claggett. Roberto Ramirez stopped this Mexican fighter, Brandon Leon Benitez. He stopped him in 7 rounds. Ramirez looked really good. He badly wants a rematch with Rafael Espinoza, the guy that beat him and beat him for his WBO featherweight title. And that's a nice rematch because Rafael Espinoza, the tallest featherweight belt holder champion in history, in a rematch with Ramirez is appealing to me because I think Espinoza is the real thing. But Ramirez looked so good last Saturday. He really looked good. He really looked focused. He's a two-time Olympic gold medalist. You know he's for real. That's one rematch I would very much welcome.
Did you see our buddy Lehman Pauly, the apologist for The Bachelor, otherwise known as Alexander Usyk, says Tio will fight Brian Norman for the WBO welterweight title next, most likely.
But Brian Norman doesn't bring anything to the table as far as marquee value. But
Teofimo can get that belt, Jack, and we know they chase the belts. I know you don't think they mean anything, but they do to the fighters.
They mean something in that it makes the fight a little more marketable. But let me throw this at you. When Tio beat Vasily Lomachenko, that should have made him a bona fide star. A bona fide star who everyone would want to fight if they thought they could beat him, or at least they would make big money.
But he wanted too much money, Jack, and sat on the shelf. And then he went out and lost his next fight.
I don't know what. Yeah. So what exactly went wrong? I mean, in his career, somehow he lost focus or whatever. But look, Tio is skillful enough that if he's serious about being very active from now on, just be active. And if you lose a fight once in a while, you'll bounce back. Then you'll win a couple of meaningful fights after that. Then you'll lose a fight. Then you'll win a meaningful fight. And you can.
Jack, they don't look at it like that. A loss is catastrophic to these guys today. Teofimo gets beat. He loses all his bragging rights unless it's to somebody like Crawford or maybe Tank or somebody like that. It's like they can't take a shot like that. Look at him. He won one of the biggest fights of the year when he beat Lomachenko. All it took was a bad show against Kambosa. That all went down the drain.
The best fight for Tio actually would be most marketable, most interest would be Ryan Garcia. As soon as Garcia's off suspension, or Garcia might even fight before he's off suspension, you put in a certain venue. Because the WBC would be backing Garcia, and somehow the BC, I have to believe, will find a way to have it.
So where they fight at 47?
No, it could be Tio could get up 147. It could be catch weight 143, 144. But then realistically, you can't have a title on the line. But maybe 147. I don't know. I mean, Garcia would do it, at that weight. Tio would do it at that weight. And think about all the trash talking, the personalities. It would do good. You really good.
Yeah, that would sell.
Yeah.
That's right. Junk sells, and all that trash talk would make it big.
Let's talk now a little about Jesse Bam Rodriguez, who stopped Francisco Estrada in 7 rounds. Now, the last show we had at the show before that, I forgot, when Tank Davis stopped Frank Martin, I said to you, Frank, Tank Davis now joins the bracket of Crawford, Inoue, Usyk, Tank Davis. I put Bam Rodriguez in the top 5. And the 5 guys I just mentioned, Frank, you could tell me that any one of them is the best fight in the world pound for pound and make a valid argument. Because Crawford's been inactive. That's his Achilles heel. I could say I don't want Crawford in this spot because he hasn't fought enough. And Inoue's been brilliant. But I'm going to tell you, Inoue has nothing over Jesse Bam Rodriguez. If you look at their
You mean as far as big wins? As
far as big wins and opponents, I can argue I'm more impressed with what Bam Rodriguez has done than what Inoue has done.
And some people think he has a better resume than Tank also.
You can make that argument, and you can make.
I think it's close.
Maybe, and Usyk, I mean, perhaps. I mean, the 5 of them. It's what I'm saying. You could put any one of them in the number 1 spot, and right on the outside would be Canelo, I guess, 6. But the Bivol better be winner. If someone wins that fight decisively and looks great, now you have a top 6, who you could flip-flop and do whatever the heck you want with. And I don't mean to get excited over just one win, but let's be honest, in boxing, one big win, one big loss changes everything.
Because the fighters don't fight that much. I mean, if we're going to go by their last fight, to me, Crawford is still far and away the best fighter in the sport. But because he hasn't fought since July 29th, almost a year ago, you penalize him for it. I guess others do. I don't do it as much because I want to see how he looks the next time out. So I think he's clearly the best fighter out. I think after that, the other 4 or 5 guys that you mentioned are jockeying for that position. I think Estrada was really good, Jack. He's picture perfect. Some of the right leads and the left leads from the backhand.
Name was picture perfect. You said Estrada. You said Estrada was picture perfect. Rodriguez.
And you know what? I meant to say that Estrada is picture perfect when he caught Bam with some of those right leads.
Oh, yeah.
But it didn't matter. Bam's angles and reflexes, his sense of distance. He got the edge in every exchange. I mean, some of the left.
I got to point that out.
He got careless there and got caught with a 1-2, got dropped, but he wasn't hurt. Then the way he set the body shot up, it looked almost like Tank against Frank Martin. That left hand from the lead position, well, not the backhand, the left as a cross. Just he set it up beautiful. You could just tell Estrada is a thinking guy's fighter, and Bam had an answer for everything. I think Estrada is entitled to a rematch. I think they'll do it again. I actually think Estrada might even do better the next time because I think he knows what he did wrong right off the bat. He's a quick study, but I just think Bam overall, Jack, is just too gifted, and there's just too much physicality there. And Bam is definitely in the conversation for one of the best in the game.
I caught you with your legs tangled up. You could go down with that comment, Frank Laterzo, because Errol Spence had a rematch clause with Bud Crawford, and he was beaten in a somewhat similar fashion the way Estrada was against Bam Rodriguez. You didn't want to know from a rematch. You didn't want to know from a rematch. You didn't want to see it have anything to do with the rematch. And now
Jack, I saw Crawford
be okay, Estrada.
I saw Crawford mutilate Spence for 9 rounds. Okay, the fight was never in question. Estrada was in the fight, got caught with a great body shot, and that was basically it. I don't think those two fights are alike at all. I think Estrada showed they're closer to the same level than what we saw with Crawford and Spence. I don't need and plus I think Crawford took Spence's heart and confidence. I'm not sure that Bam did that to Estrada.
Estrada, maybe he'll have a self-belief, and maybe he'll think about when he knocked out Bam Rodriguez, and maybe knocked down Bam, and maybe he can build on that a little bit. But I don't see it being much different in the rematch. But who knows? You know, I didn't mention that show from Miami that Tio was on before with Nico Ali Walsh, Muhammad Ali's grandson, on again. And I'll tell you the reason I mention him, because last week was the NBA draft, and the Los Angeles Lakers took LeBron James' son, Bronny James. And we kept hearing about nepotism, the only reason he's being taken and this and that. Well, they really are milking it out. Muhammad Ali's grandson. I mean, who gives a darn? But that's why the kid's getting attention, and he won a close decision over Sona Akali, the guy who beat him beforehand in his only career loss. And he had a lot of heart. His shoulder popped out, separated his shoulder in the last round, and basically fought one arm, and he's got some ability, some talent, but they keep milking.
He's not world class, Jack. He's not elite.
No, but they keep using him as a support on these shows because it's maybe some ratings and people get familiar with him. It kind of reminds me of what went on with Butterbean, but at least Butterbean had a gimmick, the king of the 4-rounders. It's like a barroom thing. You throw him. And
Butterbean could legitimately punch.
Yeah, Butterbean could legitimately punch. I'll tell you, late in Larry Holmes' career, very late when he was 52 years old, I cringed at him fighting Butterbean because there was a chance Holmes could lose that fight. And I don't care what stage you are, 52, 82, Larry Holmes is boxing royalty. We agree on that. He's pure royalty.
Right.
And as much as we respect Butterbean, and we respect Butterbean, what he brought to the table, the thought of royalty like Larry Holmes losing to the king of the four rounders would have been a little too painful for me to view.
Jack, I could see that. I didn't have too much worriment about Holmes handling Butterbean. He kind of picked him apart the way I thought he would. But I'll give Butterbean credit. Butterbean can punch. He's been in all kind of crossover sports, combat sports, and he's beat a lot of good guys outside of just boxing. So I knew going in he was tough. He could take a punch and he could deliver a punch. So Holmes had no right hand at that time. Just beat him with his jab, basically.
Yeah.
It was it was a gimmick fight, but yes, I was pulling hard for Holmes. I had no doubt that he would win. I like Nico Ali. In fact, his mother and her twin sister, Jamila, are probably my two favorite of Ali's daughters, Rashida and Jamila. I've met them. They're sweethearts.
Oh, okay.
I'm not that crazy about Layla, but I think Nico, we're going to see him when he gets beat. We're going to see him get stretched because he has no defense. He's not a big puncher. He has a big heart. And eventually that's going to get him clipped and probably stop. But I mean, I wish the kid well. He has a lot of pressure on him. And he did show heart, Jack, when that shoulder popped out. You could tell, you could see that this swelling on his shoulder. That was no gimmick there.
No, he's got some ability too, but it remains to be seen. This weekend, Frank, okay, as we mentioned before, Shakur Stevenson returns to the ring, his last fight under the contract at Top Rank. Somehow with Shakur Stevenson, and I'm not sure, I blame him 50%, and the other 50% isn't quite his fault. It's a career that's becoming disappointing to me, really disappointing, because I'm of the belief that Shakur is a great fighter. I mean, outstanding. And listen, I don't always have the best eye for talent, and I take accountability. A few months ago, I'm the one who thought Devin Haney was going to become a generational talent. I'm not talking about just a world champion, it periodically, make some title defenses. When I say generational talent, I think of a guy like a Pernell Whitaker. I thought he would approach Pernell Whitaker's status, maybe being a hair below, but that's it. And he's not going to be that Devin Haney from what I view, even though I'm sure he's going to win a title again. He's got a lot of heart. He might have a big win or two left in him. I don't know. But Shakur Stevenson was the fighter everyone was avoiding. Well,
he makes you look bad. That had something to do with it.
Right. But I blame Shakur Stevenson in this sense. What you say, Frank, all the time. It's not like it used to be. These guys could fight more. You mean to tell me if Shakur Stevenson wanted to fight more, he couldn't get more fights with Top Rank? They wouldn't, give him an extra couple of fights a year, take a little less money. Instead of getting the $1 million and $1.5 million, you get $600,000-$700,000, but you're keeping busy.
But Jack, how many? The other issue is this, and we've kind of overlooked this, but how many dates a year does Top Rank have on ESPN? Because he's not going to fight unless it's on TV, on national television. Okay, so how many dates a year do they have? Do we see 7 Top Rank cards per year? You think there are that many? Maybe there are 10. So maybe he could get on 2 of them, maybe 3 at the most. And he probably does 2 as his average right now. So it's like, that's another problem. The dates just aren't there. And nobody's going to fight unless it's a television audience for the money. To have the networks, front the money or be part of the contract. So it's like, you can blame him, and I'll give him some of the blame. But the thing is, how many dates are available that Top Rank can put him on unless it's pay-per-view? And who's he going to fight on pay-per-view? It has to be a big name. He's not going to fight anybody that nobody knows on pay-per-view. I mean, I can't even say the guy's name he's fighting, Artem Hardariam.
Yeah, but they're more than 7, 8 dates. They're different dates. You go. What is wrong with this,
Jack, are there
Frank?
12? Are there 12?
Frank.
Are there one a month? Answer that.
Frank, what is wrong with this? Let's say Shakur Stevenson, he wins his fight this weekend as expected. And let's say the next top-ranked date is in 3-4 weeks. What is wrong with him seeing Bob Arum saying, look, I want to fight. I mean ratings. I'll fight for $100,000. They'll get him.
But he's not going to.
I know he's not, but they could get him an easy opponent. And the idea he's getting this exposure, and the average fan will say, oh, I want to watch Shakur Stevenson's fighting tonight. And then they'd be saying, man, this is a guy who stays active. This is a real fighter.
They would say he fights nothing but onions, Jack. That's what they would say.
No, I think there would be a lot of sympathy if he were busy. I really do. A lot of sympathy, because it wouldn't be idle talk. This guy is ducking me. That guy is ducking me. And if he was going to sign with Top Rank, what would be wrong? You can do a pay-per-view, Shakur against Teofimo Lopez at 140. That's a nice pay-per-view fight, actually. It's an attractive fight.
But, Jack, they want to make it – the template is Leonard Hearns or Pacquiao and Mayweather. That's what all these guys dream of. They want that big showdown for the big money. And in their defense, they don't have the 3 major networks like we had in the 80s and part of the 90s, NBC, CBS, and ABC. So they're not building a following there. Showtime and HBO are gone. So now we're basically talking about what? The Zone and ESPN? Basically, the dates just aren't there, and that's a big problem.
There's Your Excellency in Saudi Arabia, who does business with all the promoters. And you mean to tell me if Bob Arum called up the Saudis and said, look, I have this great fight in Shakur Stevenson, we could put him in some colossal matchups, him against Tank Davis. Imagine that matchup.
If they're willing to put the money up, we'd see that fight. Yes, but he'd have to fight somebody good.
I think the Saudis would. I mean, we enjoy watching Tank Davis fight. We could agree on that, right? Absolutely. Okay. Of all the guys who Tank Davis can fight right now,
there's only 2.
Who are those 2?
I think Lomachenko would be a bigger fight because I still think he's more known than Stevenson.
Not who would be a bigger fight. What fight would you rather see? Tank Davis against Lomachenko or Tank Davis against Shakur Stevenson?
Without seeing what Shakur looks like this weekend, I'm going to say Tank and Lomachenko based on their last fights. And I think, and the other thing is because Lomachenko is a real fighter and legacy means something to him, I know he's going to bring it that night, and he's going to try to win and win impressively. Shakur might be content with sticking the place out and seeing if he could steal a decision.
So I think Tank let me put it another way, Frank. Who has a better chance of beating Tank? Lomachenko,
all right, so you're assuming he'd be the favorite in both fights.
Lomachenko or Shakur? That's the point I'm trying to get at. I say Shakur, without a doubt, has a better chance of upsetting Tank. It might not even be an upset in beating him as opposed to Lomachenko. Now, the Lomachenko of 5 years ago, that's a different story, okay? Because he's a little past his prime. Still a very good Lomachenko now, a very good one, but a little past his prime. We're not talking about a Lomachenko at the top of his game when he was younger, because I'd rather see him fight Tank than Shakur.
I'll tell you why I disagree with you and why I think Lomachenko will be more dangerous. Look, we know the Tank, like Crawford, maybe even more so than Crawford, needs 3 or 4 rounds to get his footing. Lomachenko, we've seen when he starts slow is when he's lost. I think Lomachenko realizes that. I think he would start quick against Tank, and Tank can't afford to lose 4 rounds to Lomachenko with 8 to go and count on winning 7 of the next 8. I actually think Lomachenko matches up better, and I could see him having a lead where I'm not sure Stevenson would put Tank in that uncomfortable position. So I think Lomachenko, I feel more, I would bet him if I had to bet the underdog, assuming they're both the underdog to Tank.
Well, the Lomachenko-Tank Davis fight turns Tank from a star into a superstar, because I think he knocks Lomachenko out at this stage of Lomachenko's career, and
Jack?
it would really elevate him.
Okay, you say that. However, Lopez, Teofimo Lopez, he beat Lomachenko pretty much conclusively. Lomachenko made a run at the end to make it close, but there's no one that saw the fight that had a problem with Lopez winning the fight, especially after he won the last round big. I think Devin Haney beat Lomachenko. That one's a lot more of a closer call, and that one's more debatable.
I had it scored a draw.
I had Haney up by a point, but Lopez beat Lomachenko. He didn't become a star. The difference is Tank is a bigger star going in than Lopez was, and he let too much time go by before he fought again. So, granted, that would be the signature win for Tank. But you know what, Jack? If Lomachenko beats Tank, that's his best win too. And that puts both guys on another level.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you could say that. I don't know what would be next for Loma. I mean, I don't know, would Loma get down to about 132 at catch weight, and they match him with Inoue then if he upset Tank?
He would do that if that was offered to him, Jack, because he knows he beats Inoue, and that would be a big win for him, even though he'd have all the advantages.
Yeah. I mean, it's intriguing. That's for sure.
But Lomachenko wants to be the undisputed champ at 135. He's not leaving 135. So that's why there's a chance we could see him fight both Tank, and if he won that fight, Stevenson.
Frank, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. When I grimace, it has nothing to do with how you feel or how you're presenting it. The word undisputed, I can't stand that. It's one of the dirtiest words in boxing. It's nonsense, undisputed. Why would anyone give a darn?
You mean because they take the belt away 2 weeks later?
Right away, you know what? You get to enjoy it. But it's like buying a house and being allowed to.
But Jack, does that really hurt Usyk? Is there anybody? And I hate to say this because I know Lehman Pauly, he might still be watching.
Lehman Pauly knows his stuff. He's the guy who said Norton with KO Lyles. So which
shows that he needs to go to school a little bit more. But anyhow, Jack, is there anybody that quasi follows boxing who doesn't think Usyk, the Bachelor, is the best heavyweight in the world, and he doesn't need the belts? The belts helped him prove that because he beat the 2 guys he had to get them. So you can say it doesn't mean anything, but like, even without the belts, Lomachenko is the best heavyweight in the world until he loses.
Frank, you see my show?
I'm sorry, Usyk.
Henry Armstrong on here, a 3-weight division world champion, when it meant something being a world champion. Now, I'm going to correct you on what you said. Already the hype's beginning. The IBF strips Usyk of the title, and they give it to Daniel Dubois.
It's a joke.
The guy who Usyk knocked out, they're giving it to Dubois because he beat Jarrell Big Baby Miller, who was coming off of long-term suspension. And then he beat Philip Hogarth, but, a nice win there. Kudos to Daniel Dubois for getting a couple wins, and he's given the title. I mean, and now he's defending it against Anthony Joshua. And we got to listen to Eddie Hearn's rubbish. And I like the way Hearn evaluates his fighters after the fight because I think he's refreshing at times. He tries to be very honest about things, I think. Even though he puts a little spin on it to favor his fight, I respect that. That's okay.
Right.
But he's essentially pretty honest afterwards. But we got to hear this. Oh, AJ could become a world champion again, and then he's going to try to be undisputed. AJ's the best heavyweight in the world. He'll be Tyson Fury. AJ's going to want to unify the titles. We're hearing from Eddie Hearn if he beats Daniel Dubois. Unify the titles. You got beaten twice in a row by Usyk. You're not unifying anything. I want to hear Eddie Hearn say Joshua wants to challenge for the titles again. We definitely feel he'll beat Usyk. That the third time will be the charm, that he's a better Anthony Joshua now than before. I'm okay with all that. Because maybe
Jack,
it's even true, but I want to hear about Joshua wanting to unify the titles. Unify what?
But Jack, that is the only way that he can say that Joshua wants to fight Usyk again and they want that fight, because he can't come out and be cocky and be belligerent about it and say we deserve it, we demand it, or none of that, because Usyk beat him twice, back to back. He has to go about it a different way. I can see why you don't like it, but I can see that he has to tread water there and tiptoe on how he says it, because he'll look like a fool if he acts like Usyk is the one that's pulling away from the fight or doesn't want the fight. So I can see that. However, there's nobody to watch Dubois and AJ and think this is a heavyweight championship fight. This is for a belt that the commissions, or I should say the establishment and the organizations, stole from Usyk to give it to Josh, or give it to Dubois, so we could see another title fight.
And I don't want to hear the term undisputed. Fury is going to have his rematch unless he bails out in December against Usyk. If Fury should win, he's the world champion. Now, I don't want to hear that. Yeah.
You said something, and I've seen them. I've seen this written and said before in articles and on social media. You said if Fury goes through with the fight, why wouldn't he go through with the Usyk fight? Because, Jack, that fight was very close. In fact, Usyk took more punches and got beat up and probably did worse than I thought he would do, even though he won. Why would Fury be leery about that? Well, when in his mind, he thinks all I have to do is get in better shape and try to be busier late in the fight than I was the last time. I mean, that fight was a 1-point fight. If you give Usyk the benefit of the doubt, he won 7-5. That's a 1-round swing from a draw. Why would Fury run away from that?
No, Usyk had a 10-8 round. Even if it's 6 rounds apiece, Usyk is up a point.
That's how I scored it, Jack. But yeah. I'm saying, say someone is going to argue and say, "Oh no, Usyk won 7 rounds." Okay, I'm not going to go to the mat with you on that. But that means 6-6. I had it 6-6. You have it 7-5. That's one round difference.
I only had Usyk up 1 point.
That's all I had him by. People were acting like that fight was a blowout. That fight was close, and Usyk was hurt in that fight.
This is a difference again. The reason we picked Usyk, I did, and I think you did too. We read a lot into how the two of them were talking, how they were acting, and we both knew Usyk was going to be so incredibly focused on the Fury fight the first time.
He had the March 8th mindset.
He had the March 8th, 1971 Smoking Joe Frazier mindset, and Fury had maybe more the Ali mindset.
Absolutely.
But when Ali fought Frazier in the rematch, Ali had a much better mindset. He went to camp much earlier and never had as long a training camp as he had for the second Joe Frazier fight. listening to Fury talk now, even though Ali made excuses after the first Frazier fight, Fury's making the excuses. He's delusional. He's making it out to be, well, I lost maybe 3 rounds at most, and I just got careless and got nailed in that. What was it? The 8th round, 9th round? I forgot. 9th round. But both guys have to crank it up again. I think Usyk is strong enough mentally to crank it up again, go to training camp for a few months, and put everything into the fight once again. I believe that, okay?
That's who he is.
Whether Fury can or can't. If Fury can, if he would go to camp for a few months and he would be as focused as Usyk is, I think he beats Usyk in the rematch. That's the big question. Usyk is probably training now. I don't mean he's training all out, but he's keeping in shape. I'm sure he's in the gym. He's hitting the bags. He's getting himself ready for training camp for when the time comes. Usyk's not going to come to training camp out of shape. Fury, I could see him coming to training camp 10 weeks before the fight out of shape. There's a very good physical trainer by the name, who's a friend of mine, even though I haven't spoken for a little while, is Scooter Honig. He works with a lot of fighters, and he told me what drives him crazy as a physical trainer are the fighters who come to him out of shape. And now he has to get them ready for the fight. They're out of shape.
I can relate to that.
Work on that hard in the beginning. You got to be in shape to be able to start working hard.
Bernard Hopkins and Floyd Mayweather were the template for that. They never had to go to camp to get in shape like James Toney did. Okay, so he had to work on his strategy, but before that, he had to worry about weight. Here's the difference between Usyk and Fury and the Ali Frazier. Number one, I think Usyk had the March 8th mindset, no doubt. The difference is Frazier was overshadowed by Ali for 6 years. And when Frazier won a gold medal, as the year Ali beat Liston. So Ali was the guy that he was always shooting for. And I think after he won that fight and he beat Ali more conclusively than Usyk beat Fury. Let's clear that up too. But I think when Frazier won against Ali, when he won Super Fight 1, I think it was like, they can never second guess me again. They can never take it away from me. Where with Usyk, Fury didn't really enter his life until about 2 years before they fought, when he started to think about them. So I think it'll be easier for Usyk to get up for Fury the next time than it was for Frazier to get up for his subsequent fights after the first Ali fight. I just think that high, I just don't think he ever really recovered from that. I don't think Usyk got as high after the win as Fury did. And the other thing is, Ali wasn't shot when Frazier beat him. I picked, and I was going with Fury to beat Usyk a year before the fight. But when I saw Usyk fight Ngannou, I realized he's shot. This isn't Ngannou's not such a killer that people think. Fury is shot. It should have never gone like that. I don't want to hear he wasn't in shape. And that is the biggest reason why I changed and I picked Usyk to win the fight. And I like him to win the rematch. And I definitely want to see it. And I don't think Usyk will back out. I mean,
yeah, good points. I want to discuss, Frank, what you did in the past week. You went to this, and I envy you for doing this. You went to some Philadelphia boxing film festival that was hosted, I believe, by a friend,
Russell Peltz.
Yeah. Tell us a little about it.
Okay. Russell had to get together, and he was showing, it's called Russell Peltz Presents Rare Fight Films from the Vault. Thursday, June 27th at 7 p.m., $5 admission. Russell has the biggest collection of film of Philly fighters, the great Philly fighters, okay? You name them, he basically has them all. I mean, he has the full Joe Frazier Bonavina rematch. It's silent, but he has the rematch. So he showed clips of guys like Tyrone Everett. No, I don't know if we saw Everett, but he showed some Sod, Cyclone Hart, Benny Briscoe, Stanley Kitten Hayward, and a lot of Gypsy Joe Harris. Now we know the legend of Gypsy Joe Harris. 24-1, 9 knockouts, had to retire because he was blind in his right eye. Only fight he lost was to Emil Griffith, I believe, in '67.
The last fight of his career. Yeah.
Right. And you hear about the guy, Jack. Now, look, I had a lot of guys contact me when I put that post up, and they said, was Gypsy Joe a great fighter or an all-time great? No. He was outstanding. But what he was a very tough guy to fight. He was entertaining. And as I said before, he had some Joe Walcott in him with some of the moves in the shuffle. He had some Whitaker in him, the way he'd get low and make you miss. He had some of the Ali flash, the way he'd move around a little bit. And he had some of the gyrations of Jorge Paez, the former featherweight champ from the 80s. And look, the guy was entertaining. Is it possible? I mean, he could have won the world title. He beat Curtis Coates, who won a world title, and he won the distance with Griffith as a middleweight. So could he have been a champion? Absolutely. But he's not an all-time great. He won't be remembered as that. And we may have never seen his best. And what it was really cool to see, I forget what fight it was, but you see Yank Durham in his corner. It was in '66.
That was his manager.
Right, manager and trainer. So in '66, that had to be against, what fight was that? I think it was Jose Stabile. And that was at the Philly Arena. And to see Joe Frazier in '66 get in the ring when he's probably not even ranked yet, and just to think your mind, there's Joe Frazier messing around in the corner with Gypsy Joe and Yank, and knowing all that was about to happen with him. So it was a fun time. I think everybody that was there had a great time. We saw films for 2.5 hours. Russell did some voiceover of it, and it was just a good time. Gave you a little history, showed certain guys in the corner, Milt Bailey, who never changed, Quinzel McCall, different guys that were there at the fight. Ernie Terrell was there for a lot of the fights at the Philadelphia Arena, coming off the Chuvalo fight. And then there was even one fight. It had to be sometime in '67. Maybe it was the Curtis Coates fight. I think it was. That was at Madison Square Garden. And Terrell, I think, still had a patch over his eye from the Ali fight.
Well, the reason Gypsy Joe had to retire, because he only had sight in one eye, was blind in one eye. And it was debatable whether or not, he was blind in one eye all along. He claimed later on he'd been blind throughout his career in one eye. And Yank Durham would say, no way he could be that slick, being blind in one eye. So that's something we'll never know. But I remember Smoking Joe Frazier, and you're going to laugh at this. They asked him once, was Sugar Ray Robinson the greatest fighter of all time? And Joe, being Joe, said, no, Robinson was really good, but I go with Gypsy Joe Harris. He could put on a boxing exhibition like no one could ever see. So
he was entertaining.
Gypsy Joe was the greatest. And let me point out, when Gypsy Joe beat Curtis Coates, what was it, in 1967 at Madison Square Garden, Curtis Coates was the so-called undisputed world welterweight champion, okay? But it was a non-title match, a 10-rounder. The year before Coates lost to Gypsy Joe Harris, to show you how good Coates was, he stopped Luis Rodriguez in 15 rounds, and Rodriguez was in his prime. And Coates stopped the great Luis Rodriguez when he was in his prime in 15 rounds. And Coates is in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Whether he should be or not could be debatable, but the point is he's there. And Gypsy Joe...
stopping Rodriguez is big because Griffiths couldn't do it in 4 fights.
Right. He legitimately beat Gypsy Joe, the world welterweight champion, at Madison. And it wasn't a hometown decision either. The United Press International, they had Gypsy Joe winning 6 rounds to 4. So it was it seemed to have been like a legitimate win. He also beat good fighters. Jose Stable, and Stanley Kitten Hayward he beat. He beat guys like that. I mean, those are name guys, Miguel Barreto. I mean, he beat decent guys. Somehow, Frank, you're a little more familiar to Philadelphia.
He beat Bobby Cassidy, too.
Bobby Cassidy, too. Man, oh, man. Somehow you're a little more familiar with the Philadelphia fight fraternity. You are, not somehow, than I am. Some of these fighters seem to flame out a little bit, like Frank the Animal Fletcher. He had a good thing going, then he loses to Wilfred Scipien on the verge of a title match. He kind of flames out, Eugene Cyclone Hart, Willie the Worm Monroe, Bobby Boogaloo Watts. They don't quite go all the way, some of these guys, but they've had memorable careers.
It's funny you say that, Jack. Do you know who Timmy Sinise is?
Timmy Sinise.
He's a Philadelphia trainer. He trains a lot of young guys now. But he's been around the Philly fight scene for a long time. He fought in the Navy. He's about 70 years old now. And I just so happened to be sitting next to him while I was at the event. And we had a real nice conversation. And we were talking, and I was telling him about like some of the fighters, like the name Curtis Parker came up, talking about because Willie Reddish was in the ring.
You sparred with him, Curtis.
And
Parker.
We were talking about Curtis Parker, and Timmy was saying, and I mean, I knew this, but it hasn't changed in 40 years. He was talking about how the Philadelphia gym wars, that's real. And those guys, when they go at it, when they spar, it's almost a fight with headgear on and 10-ounce gloves. And it was that way when I trained in Philly. Apparently it's still that way, and it must affect some of the guys that we talk about, like Fletcher, like Parker. Both of those guys probably should have gone further than they did. They didn't for different reasons, but Philadelphia's had a lot of talent go through there. And remember, Hagler had to get his apprentice going through the Philly middleweights. Yeah. He lost 2 fights to them. One was disputed. One was a clear loss. But he had to fight all those guys, and he fought them in Philly and in Boston.
Yeah, I mean, those Philly gym wars, you would think the trainers would step forward, that the trainers would get together with one another and say, this isn't doing our guys any good. This sparring, once in a while, they could go at it hard. It's okay, but not like on a continuous basis. And now you're talking about other. I mean, but it's hard for me to imagine Matthew Saad Muhammad, a Philly fighter, and all those wars in the Philly gyms. Saad was a war machine in the ring, but somehow, I believe it. I've heard about it. Smoking Joe Frazier. Of course, he'd always be ready for a punch out.
He only had one speed.
But Joe, at least, I heard, would work with guys. He wasn't looking to take their head off. He'd hit him a hard hook. He saw if he shook him up, he would lay off. But some of these other guys, the way you describe it, they were looking for knockouts in the Philly gym wars. If they had you hurt, they tried to finish you. Is that correct?
I saw Saad spar often, and it all depended on who he sparred, Jack, on how they went. But I can tell you this much. Guys like Curtis Parker, Dwight Muhammad Cowie, they basically sparred the way they fought. Briscoe, it all depended on who he was sparring. And when I was around him, he was a little bit older at the time. But, yeah, the Philly gym war is a real thing. And it's just a shame that that's the case because a lot of guys do lose it in the gym. There's not as many gyms in the city as there was. At one time, it was the capital of the world for boxing. In the 70s and 80s, Frazier's Gym, Jack, had so many. I saw so many great guys there, from Duran to Leonard to Hearns to Hagler to Michael Spinks, Saad Muhammad, Marvin Johnson, Eddie Mustafa. In the 80s, the heavyweights that came through there, I saw Dokes, Page, Leroy Diggs, Marvin Stinson.
Pinklin Thomas,
Bone Crusher Smith, Tim Witherspoon. there were still some elite guys at that time because Marvis Frazier at that time was sparring a lot of those guys when he was first coming up as a pro. And, I said this countless times. I never saw anybody get the best of Marvis Frazier sparring. I saw him handle Cobb, Jimmy Young, everybody sparring. I thought Marvis would go on to be, have a little bit better career than he did. But, he also came up in a tough era, but he only lost to two guys, the two best heavyweights of the 80s.
Speaking of a career, you were going to say something about Rocky Marciano. You'd mentioned before the show.
Jack Tiff, Rocky Marciano was born 101 years ago today. And I'm not going to say he's the greatest, but I have so much respect for him because I don't think there's ever been a fighter where winning meant so much to him. And we know his loves were money and fighting, and winning meant so much to him. And you can just, that for the fact that he was offered money to fight Ingemar Johansson after Johansson beat Patterson. And he went away to his camp in Jersey to try to get in shape. Or what was it? No, it was in Brockton. I'm sorry. Or outside of Brockton. And Jackie said after 2.5 weeks, he didn't have the desire to push away from the food or to get up and do that extra mile. And he said that's when he knew it was over. And he was offered more money for fighting Johansson than he made in his entire career. And he turned it down because he knew that if he never lost, and he said, I don't want my name on Ingemar Johansson's record as a loss, and I don't want his name on my record as a loss. And you just know how much it meant to him, and he understood that being undefeated was all that matters. And after saying all those good things about Rocky, about the condition he was in, how hard he trained, how tough he was, how he could fall asleep in the dressing room before a fight and wake up 20 minutes and get gloved up and go out and fight, all those nice things about him, Jack. I've said this rarely. I've never said it to you, but I really do believe that he would have never done the computer fight with Ali unless he knew he was going to win.
I kind of feel, I don't mean he knew the result beforehand, but you got to consider, Frank, this was 1969, and Ali's popularity wasn't nearly what it later became. He was disliked in certain areas. Later on, everyone would love Ali, but at that time, there were a lot of, he wasn't the most popular guy on the planet, far from it. And
no, Rocky was beloved at that time.
Was beloved. You had to know Marciano's not losing, but I heard there were two versions. Ali was much more popular in Europe than Marciano.
And they had him winning.
In Europe, but here in the United States, Marciano came from behind. Marciano was knocked down early. He knocked Ali out, kind of coming from behind the way he did against Jersey Joe Walcott.
Jack, that's the fight they emulated. Think about that. The school of thought was Ali could run, he could box. Nobody knew how tough he was at that time. Nobody knew what kind of a punch he could take. So they made it a 13th round KO, just like the walk-on fight.
Let me tell you, a year or two before that, they had a computerized heavyweight tournament. And Ali was outpointed in 15
by
rounds
Jeffries.
By Jim Jeffries. Ali rallied late. Jeffries won, something 7 rounds to 5 at 3 even.
And that made Ali crazy.
And Dempsey won a decision over Joe Louis. And Dempsey then got knocked out by Marciano in the finals. And Dempsey wasn't happy. And he talked about the fight with Louis. He says, him winning by decision. He says, what are people going to think? We both lost our punch. It going to a decision. That would be the equivalent of a Foreman-Tyson fight in their prime.
It goes the distance.
It's going the distance. I mean, could it go
Not going to happen.
It's possible, I suppose, but what are the chances of Foreman-Tyson in their prime going the full distance?
Jack, I really do believe the more I thought about it, and no Marciano, and Ali needed the money, so I don't really think he cared. But I really do believe they winked to Marciano and said, yeah, you're probably going to get him. And supposedly he told his brother when he said, how did you do in that computer fight before it was released? And he said, oh, I won.
Yeah. We'll pick up on this next week, Frank. Nice, fast-paced hour. I enjoyed it a lot.
All right, Jack. Have everybody. Thanks for watching. Have a safe and great 4th of July. You too, Jack, and we'll be back next week.